Thank you. We'll call today's Housing, Urban Development, and Zoning Committee to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Present.
Vice Chair Sonnier.
Present.
Alderman Browning.
Present.
Chair Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Alderman Cone. We have 4 present. We have a...
Thank you. With that, I'll accept the motion to approve the minutes, from Tuesday, February 27th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sonnier.
Aye.
Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Chair Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
We have 4 aye votes.
You doing good, sis. Okay, we're going to move around. We'll go to item number 1. We're going to have committee discussion on the Industrial Development Authority's mayoral appointments. We have Mr. Gary Reed, Victor Zarrilli, or Sean King present. Okay. Whoever wants to come up first. I know that's right. Madam Clerk will swear you in, and then we'll go from. Madam Clerk is going to swear you in, and then we'll go.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Yeah.
Probably not going to be able to stick to 1 minute. I did swear to tell them. But at any rate, I've served on the Industrial Development Authority since the beginning of the administration of Francis Slay. Before that, I was 8 years on the Heritage and Urban Design Commission before the Mayor Harmon turned us into the Preservation Board. And, it's been a great honor looking at all the things that I've had something to do with. On that Heritage and Urban Design, we saved the International Fur Exchange building, the American Zinc building, Syndicate Trust building, all from take Paradise and put up a parking lot. That's what these people wanted to tear down, to make a surface parking lot. And then we'll come up with a suitable reuse later. Well, we decided we wouldn't grant those kinds of demolitions. We got in trouble also on commercial signage. I think that's why we were turned into the Preservation Board, because Walgreens wanted pole signs and letterboards. What the Heritage Commission wanted them to do was a berm sign, which wouldn't really traffic up the whole streetscape. And then after that, I got on the Industrial Development Authority, and that's a whole different thing than a variance board. And we finally got in on the side of redevelopments and housing and education. We did the library, for goodness sake. We did with so many other projects. We were involved with the Ballpark Village. We're involved with senior living. I mean, on our next agenda, it's probably going to see the hat factory from historic Soulard being redeveloped, 100 units in a building that was built in 1904, reused as more senior housing. So I would hope that you consider my nomination. I'm honored to be nominated by this mayor. I've been under, Freeman, Clarence Harmon, Francis, Lyda, and now to be nominated by Mayor Jones. And I'm kind of honored to be here too, because I've been in this building before, in this room, where I met Judge McLeod. He was the liquor commissioner at the time, and I was just a young whippersnapper, moved here from transferred here from Illinois, and before that from Indiana. We were applying for our liquor license, and he was throwing the book at everybody. And we were thinking, what did we get into here? And he ended up being so kind, and our hearing went very well. So I appreciate that. And also, Madam Chair, I'll probably be seeing you this afternoon. 2 o'clock, we have a hearing, special hearing on St. Louis Development Corporation. So I asked kindly to, let me do this again. It's still fun.
Now that I love to hear, and we just thank you. We're honored to have you. Thank you for your continued decades of service to the city of St. Louis in all of these different capacities. Your willingness to say yes has made the difference clearly. So with that, I'll open up for my colleagues. And I will say that Alderman Cone is sad that he couldn't be here as well to vouch and advocate for you, because we spoke earlier and he shared your sentiments about, again, wanting to be here for you. So Alderwoman Slicer.
Thank you, sir, for coming and for being here to give that info to us. That was a very thorough explanation of your time and your service, and I appreciate you giving it. I did get a chance to talk with you a little bit before this committee hearing, so you answered all of my questions about why you serve and what you've done, and I just really appreciate you wanting to serve in this way and serve your city. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to supporting your nomination. Thanks.
Cool, thank you.
Alderman Browning.
Similar sentiments as my colleague. Just want to thank you for your service so far to our city, and look forward to supporting your nomination.
Vice Chair Sonnier.
I just think all these examples of service are so amazing to see on paper. I think sometimes people only think of kind of public service in one way and sort of as elected service. So I love all the listing of these roles and the ways that you've really taken an active role in your community. And I look forward to supporting you and continuing to do so.
I did try to run for office once. I lost by 61 votes.
Oh, wow.
Brian
that was
Bobby beat me.
way too
everybody
close. You
knows
have to try
Brian.
again. Thank you so much for your service. Are the other two, or is Mr. Victor Zarrilli or Sean King here?
Sean King is here
Okay.
online.
Okay, great. If you can,
Video on for me, Mr. King.
Say again, I'm sorry.
if
please.
you can turn your video on, then the clerk, Madam Clerk, is going to swear you in.
It says that it's disabled because the host has disabled it. There we go.
There we go. Could you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear
Can you
or
see it?
that? Yes. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You may proceed.
My name is Sean King. I grew up in the St. Louis area. I have been in the city for a little under 10 years. Gary and I are friends, and he's asked me to last few years to get involved, and I found this as an opportunity to start my involvement in some of the local city organizations.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. King, and thank you for taking the time out to be here this morning to answer questions. Alderwoman Slicer.
Okay.
Sure, thank you. Can you give us just a little bit more information about why this particular board is interesting to you?
I think it gives me a thorough look at what's going on in the city, gets me out looking at other parts of the city as well. Most of my charity work or community service has been through charities. And so that's taken me all over the St. Louis city and county for some of those boards. And I just thought that this would give me a very good view of the city to start.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, and interested to see what you think of it after a little while. If we make it through, I plan on supporting you today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alderman Browning.
No questions. I just appreciate you wanting to serve, and appreciate your interest in our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Sonnier.
Thank you for your service. No questions.
Thank you.
All right, and I echo again my thank you for your service and your taking the time out to be here with us this morning. Is Mr. Victor Zarrilli? I hope I'm not pronouncing it too wrong. Was he able to make it? Yay.
No.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is we're going to take this up for approval at one time. Let me say that we, again, appreciate you all coming to be here this morning, but this is not our first opportunity as alders. We receive your bios, we receive your resumes, we receive your contact information, as well as there's a vetting process before you even get to this point. So I'm saying that to say I'm excited to be able to support you all moving forward. And with that, I'll accept a motion to approve the mayor's appointments of Mr. Reed, Mr. Zarrilli, and Mr. King to the Industrial Development Authority.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Schweitzer,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sonnier. Alderman Browning,
Aye.
Chair Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
We have 5 aye votes.
Congratulations. And I'll go a little bit out of order since Alderman Cone was able to be here, and I know you're here to advocate for Mr. Reed, and he spoke of you as well. So if you had any comments you wanted to make publicly on the record for him before we move forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have known Mr. Reed for quite a long time and appreciate the service as continuous city in various capacities. Thank you for your time this morning being here. My apologies. I see that. But thank you again for all of your service to our city, and I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll move forward to item number 2. We will discuss the mayoral appointments of Patrick Hughes and Brandon Smart to the Tax Increment Financing Commission. I see Mr. Smart is available on Zoom. Is Mr. Hughes here? Okay. We'll go ahead and have you speak. Go with Mr. Smart on Zoom. But we can't swear you both in at the same time.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I do.
Thank you. You may continue.
So, brief statement. I've been a city resident off and on for most of my life. As a child, I was. When I graduated college, I moved back to the city. Lived in the suburbs for a while, but I've been a city resident for about 20 years. I'm interested to help however I can to make our city a better place. I try to keep up with current events, and especially with the TIF Commission. I feel like there's some real benefits to it, but we got to make sure we don't abuse it. So I feel like I have a lot to offer. I've been an IT project manager for most of my career, primarily in the private sector. And I retired recently. I do a lot of traveling, but I'm willing to make sure I'm here and weigh in on important issues for the city.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time out to be here, and thank you. I love what you said about just wanting to make the city better. And so we appreciate your service. And with that, Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate what you said about wanting to make sure that TIFs are used in a way that is for the benefit and not to abuse that process. And I think that is such an important thing because, of course, we know our city needs to fund development and to make sure that we are taking care of resources and developers are able to take care of the resources we have, but it cannot be abused. It must be a thoughtful process. So, one of the things that happens with these bills is that, when we see them, you've already seen them. You've already talked about them, and you're, way ahead of when the Board of Aldermen gets involved. So knowing that that's your lens and that's the lens in which the bill arrives to us, I really do appreciate that, and I appreciate your service. So thank you for giving us that background, and I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Thank you.
Alderman Cone.
I don't have any questions. Thank you very much, Madam.
I apologize for the skip. Alderman Browning.
Thank you, and echo my colleague again. Thank you for being willing to serve. Just one question, and this is just a very general question, but when you're looking at a TIF, what are the things that you're looking for in order to make sure that it is a benefit?
This may be a little controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. Alderman Browning, I lived in your ward the last election. I subsequently moved to Shamim's ward 6 months ago. Our neighborhood has had quite a bit of TIF over my lifetime, let's say. And it's been very beneficial, but I think it's time that we maybe be a little bit more stringent upon projects needing it. Other parts of the city probably need every TIF they can get for things to happen. So I think we just need to be critical. I mean, there's some things where I think we've provided some assistance that maybe wasn't necessary. So I just want to be very objective. And I also feel like my role will be to try to follow the guidance of alderpersons and the mayor in regards to what you guys think, or you ladies think is correct. So I try to be objective, and I think I'll do the right thing, but we probably need to maybe cut back on some of it and increase it where we can in other areas.
No, that's a great answer. I really appreciate it, and I'm in agreement with you. I think that we have a lot of needs in our city, and the difference, between tax abatements and how TIFs are used is that TIFs often go towards a vital infrastructure area. And so when we think of things like the Foundry, which has been a wonderful success, but had significant infrastructure needs. And so I know people like to point to that as a mistake, but I actually think that was a good use. So I appreciate that critical eye, because weighing the benefits and the costs is exactly how we need people to address that. So thank you so much.
I appreciate your answer as well. Thank you. That was great. Vice Chair Sonnier.
Thank you for your service and your answer to that question. I really agree with you. No questions at this time.
All right, Mr. Hughes, welcome to the 10th Ward also, and welcome to the Tax Increment Financing Commission. Mr. Smart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Brandon Smart. I was born and raised in St. Louis City, grew up in the Car Square neighborhood, specifically off Fallon Place. I went to college in Chicago. I returned back to St. Louis 10 years ago. Lived in the city. I am a real estate professional by trade. Last year, I was the chair of St. Louis Realtors Association, the commercial division board, and have an array of experience in commercial real estate. It's my background. And so the reason that I'm interested in serving on this board is it allows me to give back to the city. I am very much interested in seeing the city grow, as we are all St. Louis residents and fans of St. Louis, just telling that story and showing the world what St. Louis has to offer. And so my interest is just giving back to the city. I serve on a number of different boards, and volunteer for a number of different organizations, from the Boys and Girls Club to I'm still a board member with the Realtor Association as well. So I'm just interested in giving back. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old and just want to make the world a better place. And so that's what I'm here for. I offer a unique perspective because I do have a real estate background, and so I can balance between, if there's any questions regarding, specific real estate questions, I can offer that opinion to the board, but still be unbiased with my opinion and seeing that, this is for the greater good of everybody and not, the greater good of just some individual. So thank you for having me, and that's my background.
All right, thank you, Mr. Smart. Thank you for taking the time out to be here this morning, your dedication, your commitment. I have seen you out in the community, so I have seen firsthand your dedication to making the world better, as you said. So we making the city better this morning, making the world better this morning. So we're excited to have you. With that, I'll ask my colleagues, Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderman Cone.
I don't have any questions this morning for you. Just want to, thank everyone that's here today for your interest in serving city government and kind of appointed capacity here. It's not always easy finding citizens who want to spend their free time engaging in these types of issues, but certainly appreciate those who want to step up to the plate and participate in city government. And so very much appreciate your interest in this to our city. Thank you.
Alderwoman Slicer.
Thank you so much for being here and your service to the city of St. Louis. I appreciate the line you said where you're a fan of St. Louis, and I feel like that applies to so many of us in the room, and just really liked that. And I think that is a great attitude to bring. So thank you so much. I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Alderman Browning.
Yes, absolutely. I think we're all fans of St. Louis, and that's why we're up here. So appreciate your willingness to serve. Same question goes to you. What do you look for in a TIF to measure whether it's a benefit to St. Louis or not?
Yeah, I think a benefit to the community that specific development serves is critical. How does this benefit the community, the residents? Is this self-seeking? Does this not fit into an overall plan? Would be, the number one thing that I would look for is the, you mentioned the city foundry, and I don't know, exactly how people feel about that, but that's a great benefit to us all because it brings us together as a community. And so that's what I would look for.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your willingness to serve again. I have no more questions and look forward to supporting your nomination.
Vice Chair Sonnier.
Thank you for your service, Mr. Smart. No question.
All right. With that, I will accept the motion. Again, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smart, for taking the time out for being here this morning. Both of you all's clearly your dedication as well as your unique skill sets and lived experiences are going to add a lot of value to this board. With that, I will accept the motion to approve the mayor's appointments of Patrick Hughes and Brandon Smart to the Tax Increment Financing Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Previous roll.
Previous roll.
All right. Hearing no objections, congratulations, and thank you all again for your service. Have a blessed day. All right, we'll move on to item number 1, Board Bill 227. Vice Chair Sonnier, you're recognized.
Okay. Good morning still. Good morning, members, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Today, I do have a brief presentation for you, but it is really fairly brief just to kind of explain some of the main components of the bill. In the copy that you all have, just wanted to make sure also you knew that the bolded and underlined sections are like new text for the bill, and everything else is copied over property code management. That's just a requirement to make sure it's clear that what we are changing and what we're advising here. Next slide. Okay, so again, just for key components of Board Bill 227, just to kind of root us first in what it is essentially a reform bill for our plat and petition process collected to special residential uses, which will include shelters and a number of other homes. So just first thing first, a lot of it is International Property Management Code that's covered over, and those changes begin on pages 35 through 46. Everything before that is just existing code already. One of the things that the bill does is it adds some clarifying definition of special residential uses. So one of the ones that I would point to is currently we refer to domestic violence shelters as battered women's shelters. We would be changing under this bill, we would be changing domestic violence shelters, but these are kind of already terms that exist, and so we just needed to define them, particularly because there are some entities that this bill won't apply to, like university dormitories, those shelters that have that privacy protection. So we needed to have clear definitions so we can make sure it's clear that those that have the expectation of privacy, this does not apply to them. And then another key point in the bill, the big reforms in the plat and petition process is that we would be moving the threshold for signature collection to 25%, but we will also be adding a mandatory requirement of 100% for awareness. So under this process, folks who want to open up these facilities will have to send out a postcard to everyone who is within that 500 feet vicinity that will qualify plat and petition with their hearing information if they're successful in gathering those signatures. And then another key change is who does signature verification. We will be moving signature verification over to the Board of Election Commissioners. Right now, the signature verification is done by our planning department, and they call each person manually one by one. And so the Board of Elections already has kind of the technology that's needed, especially since we're requiring that the providers send out the postcard. They will be able to draw the petition circle, provide the addresses, provide the name, and provide that information, so they will also be verifying it. The second big key component of Board Bill 227 is we are creating a provisional license for shelters and for these special residential uses. I think many of us as alders are very familiar with the city's revocation process and some of the struggles with it, and it really puts a lot of communities and us as community leaders in a hard position because sometimes we want to try these things out, but just the process in place, I think some of us just have varying feelings on the strength of that. And so this bill will create it where you get a provisional license to operate. So if you're successful in collecting your signatures, you will have your first hearing. If your first hearing goes well, you would be granted a provisional license for 120 days or 4 months, with the understanding that you would be having another hearing after that time is up for another license for additional 4 months. And then at the 8-month mark, you would have your third and final hearing. And at that hearing, then a permanent license could be given. That's very important because we want to begin to have these conversations rooted in data, rooted in lived experiences. We want to expand the public engagement component. We want communities to be able to still be a part of the process if they adjust to the shelter or whatever facility becoming a part of their community. And so we will be able to pull nuisance reports or police reports and things like that to really have some data to back up how those things have been working. And then the last thing, just to be clear, is that shelters and transitional housing applicants under this proposed bill will also have to submit operational plans, and it goes pretty into detail on what is the operational plan, because obviously when you're evaluating kind of the success of a proposed facility, you need to know, like, what is their staffing, what are the resources that would be available at the shelter, and so we want to make sure that we get that information on the front end. And then the last point is just that renewals of the permanent license would not have to repeat this entire process. This is the process just for when you first begin. And with that, I can take any questions from you all.
Did you all have questions you want to ask now, or you want to wait till after the speakers? Okay. Madam Clerk, we can move with the speaker list.
Yes, we have 4 public speakers. Sorry, five public speakers.
Okay, everyone in the room that was wanting to speak, have you all signed up? Okay, great. I will have you all raise your right hand and be sworn in.
Do you swear that this testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth? So our first speaker is Pat Acquisto. Ms. Acquisto, you have 3 minutes. Okay, thank you. And you're in opposition.
Yes. Thank you. I'm Pat Acquisto, and I'm with the Lindenwood Park Neighborhood Association. I have several issues with this bill. Thank you for allowing the community a chance to speak, and hopefully we'll have more chances. We all want to help the homeless. I mean, seriously, we all want to help the homeless. But there's several degrees of homelessness, from people that just need a hand, they're in a temporary position and they need some help, to chronic homelessness. So I don't see any mention of that in the bill. So I'm not sure, even though you're going to have a list of names and the reasons that, the services that these people need, I don't see how the building commission is going to understand that, supervise it, look over it. So I don't see that as a very good idea. And I understand the reason for the bill is because, shelters tried to get into some neighborhoods and they couldn't get 50% of the signatures on the petition. And I can see that that's a problem for providers. But in my mind, the solution would be to find out what the objections are from these neighbors. Are they legitimate? And how can we come up with a solution that suits everyone instead of seeing the solution as passing an ordinance to require less signatures? In other words, it feels like if you don't like it, we'll just make it easier for us and harder for you, which doesn't really benefit the community. So as someone who has dealt with city enforcement of property a number of times, I don't see how this building commission is going to be able to do this. We have so many problem properties that we involve the building division in, and we can't get things resolved. It's very hard. We have problem properties that go on for years. It's very hard to shut things down once they enter, once they're in there. 120 days, you move people into a facility for 120 days, and then you decide, well, this isn't working. And then what are you going to do? You're going to move these people out of that facility then? And then what happens to the owner of the property? These are things that I'm not clear on. It has many unanswered questions. It leads me to believe that it's not thought out with the neighborhoods in mind. What is the protest process? And is it sufficient to protect the neighborhoods? Are sex offenders going to be residents of the shelter? Are they allowed to be in close proximity of a school? I don't see an answer to that in the ordinance. What are the surrounding municipalities doing to help the homeless?
Ms. Acquista,
Other
your time.
communities. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you said you're from the Lindenwood? Yes. I am so impressed. You all are really organized and show up and you do your background. I love that. I absolutely love that. So kudos to you all.
Our next speaker is Matt O'Leary.
Good morning. Thanks for allowing me to testify on Board Bill 227. I will be supplementing my testimony with some specific comments associated with the text of the bill. There are a variety of deficiencies associated with the bill, but for this hearing, I wanted to talk kind of at a bigger level about certain things that the board bill doesn't do. First of all, so I got involved in homelessness issues when I served on the Mayor's Task Force to End Chronic Homelessness in 2005. That was when the city was adopting housing first, and there were about 350 chronically homeless men on the streets at that point in time. The point of the 2005 10-year plan was to end chronic homelessness in the city. So I participated in the plan that we developed, which said if we add 500 permanent supportive housing beds, that will eliminate chronic homelessness in the city over a 10-year period of time. So 10 years go by, we add 500 permanent supportive housing units, and at the end of the day, there are more chronically homeless men on the streets at the end of that 10-year period of time. Over the last 8 years, the city has added roughly 1,000 permanent housing units or shelter units. And over that period of time, we have increased the size of the homeless population by 1,000 people. The issue is simply that every time the city adds beds or units, people come into the city to use it, and we don't get anywhere. So if this board bill results in us adding 300 shelter beds, we're going to have 300 more homeless people in the city of St. Louis, and we will not have addressed the problem. Second point, our real crisis in the city right now that's resulting in people dying is we don't have enough cold weather shelter beds. We haven't had a municipal shelter since about 2015, which was the Park and Tucker facility under the Slade administration. This bill doesn't address that real crisis that exists today. There are exceptions in plat petition where the building commissioner can allow temporary cold weather shelters to exist without plat and petition. This bill does not address cold weather shelter, and we need to address cold weather shelter. And we need it through a municipal facility. Third, there aren't changes to the zoning laws associated with this. So people might say the loss of plat and petition is not that big of a deal because there are still zoning protections in the various zoning districts. The issue is that we were in conversations with the mayor's office related to downtown zoning, and the mayor's office made it clear that they view the zoning prohibitions as unconstitutional and unenforceable. They basically told us that we're not going to pass revisions to CBD zoning unless we get rid of the downtown zoning prohibition, because otherwise it's unconstitutional. So they basically said that zoning prohibitions will be treated as conditional uses. And that's basically, as far as I can tell, what happened related to the Peter and Paul shelter that just got approval to open up in Kosciuszko. It was a K unrestricted zoning area, but there was a prohibition on shelters, but it was treated, as far as I can tell, at the Board of Adjustment as a conditional use.
That's your time, Mr. O'Leary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Keith Fairchild, in opposition, you have 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Keith Fairchild, president of Boulevard Heights Association, also a member of the Alliance. I am the one that usually runs around, and I go to all the other board meetings of the associations. So I'm the one that goes to North St. Louis, I go to South St. Louis, everywhere. They're all the comments from the other associations. So what I brought back specifically from the last 11 weeks of meetings is the problem with a lot of associations with the aldermen is they don't know what board bills are coming up. All of a sudden, board bill shows up. They don't know what's coming up, how the alderman's going to vote. They've never been given a chance to tell the alderman how to vote. So specifically in reference to this board bill, we'll keep it here, 227, reference to plat and petition. No one wants plat and petition modified. No association, no planning group, no planning committee, whether it be up on St. Louis Avenue or down on Sublet. Everybody wants involvement in what happens in their neighborhood. I take great pride in meeting with a lot of different people, and the stories are all the same. We want to say what we want to say, so what happens in our neighborhoods. That's very important to us. These meetings are put on during the day. It's hard for everybody to come to attend these meetings. Time frame is hard for everyone. We would also entertain maybe some congressional type hearings in the future. We can actually have interactions with some of the specialists that we have within the Alliance, our neighborhood associations, our planning committees, neighborhoods, parts of St. Louis, because we like to hear you guys to hear exactly what is being said on the streets of our concerns within the neighborhoods, whether it be north or south. So our major concerns is the removal of plat and petition in any form to say what happens. We're trying to develop certain areas of the city. We all know that. And they want us, everybody wants to say so on how that portion is developed within the neighborhood themselves. I appreciate your time. I'll answer any questions. Otherwise, I'll be glad to take a seat.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you for your dedication here and your service. I have some questions. Can you give some examples of the neighborhood associations that you visited about Board Bill 220?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Can you give some examples or name me some of the neighborhood associations and organizations? Because I frequent a lot of meetings too. Well, of course, in the 10th ward, but
I just spoke at the Granville Saturday. I was invited up by State Rep Collins to give a breakdown on plat and petition. I've met with Ville, I've met with Old North St. Louis, I've met with Walnut Park, Hyde Park, just to name a few.
Great. So that sounds like 12th, 13th, and 14th wards. And then what were the other wards that you named? You said you go south as well?
I'm sorry, I can't.
You said you go south. I said, so the neighborhood associations that you just named were 12th, 13th, 14th that you said you spoke at about Board Bill 227?
Mm-hmm.
And then you said you went south as well?
It was mostly about plat and petition. That's what they asked.
Oh, okay.
Plat and petition.
Okay. All right. And can you give me some examples of the ones south as well for my colleague?
Down south, Southwest Gardens. I've been to St. Louis Hills. I've been to all the way down to past Central West End. I've been to numerous ones.
Okay.
I mean, it's the same thing. I question. I'm trying not to be rhetorical. Same question I've asked. I'd love to ask the alderman. What constituents have you guys asked specifically, because I get asked at every board meeting, I ask them, have the aldermen discussed this board with you? Not this bill, every board bill. Not so much. Not every ward, but some wards.
Yeah, great.
They're in the
So-
dark.
Yeah, I want to push back on that because a lot of us spend a lot of intentional time building relationships with our constituents. I know in the 10th ward I have an issue. I know that my colleagues, not just representing here, but across the board, do spend intentional time. And so we also depend on constituents like yourself who say that they go around to the different neighborhoods and the different areas to spread the information, because there is no one vehicle or tool that's going to reach everybody. But I know that we do hear, I can speak for myself, that I hear from my constituents, text, email, calls. They continue to show up and look at STLTV. Thank you for STLTV for always recording and airing these videos so they can go back and watch. My constituents, I hear from them daily about how they would want us to be, how they would want to be represented down here at the Alderman. So again, I thank you. No, sir, I'm not. I'm in the 10th ward. And so I thank you for your commitment and your service to go around. And hey, there might be a community organization that really wants to hear from you as well. Can you again share your contact information? Maybe they can get in contact with you. I know you didn't name any in the 10th ward, but maybe there are some that will want to reach you.
Maybe with the lady.
Yeah, well, you can say it here because these are aired live streamed and people can go back and share it.
The contact information is Keith Fairchild at bhcpunit1@gmail.com.
Great, thanks. Okay, so now we're back on track. See, I had in my mind that Alderman Cone wasn't going to be able to come today, so that's why I kept skipping him, inadvertently skipping him.
Answer to your question, I am asked to go to a lot of organizations. I just don't show up.
Oh, wow. Well, what would make you not show up with your commitment to wanting to share the information?
I'd be glad to come to yours.
No, I mean, what would make you not want to show up? What would make you not want to show up? You said you just don't show up, and I'm just curious why.
Typically, associations don't go to other associations unless they're asked. And I've been asked to attend other association meetings. I've been doing this for about, 4 months now.
Great. All right, Alderwoman Slicer.
No questions, thank you.
Alderman Brownie.
No questions, thank you.
Vice Chair Sonnier.
Thank you for participating in the process. No questions.
All right, have a blessed day.
Ellen Kistner. I'm sorry, Elkin.
Thank you. My name is Elkin Kistner. I am the president of the newly founded River Mound Neighborhood Association. The geographic boundaries of that are Mississippi River on the east, Biddle Street on the south. On the west side, it's North Broadway, and on the north, it's Mound Street. So it's actually a subsection of the near North Riverfront neighborhood. I want to say, I'm not going to make this lengthy at all. I want to endorse what my previous opponents had to say. I support what they had to say, and I agree with what they had to say. I want to mention, though, that I bring a little bit of a different perspective. I think that the neighborhoods should not have their voices weakened as to homeless shelters or liquor licensees. One of the reasons why that's true is, unfortunately, for example, with respect to the homeless population, particularly the chronically homeless, they need real assistance. The practical reality, in most instances, through no fault of their own, they have problems. Sometimes those problems manifest themselves as types of nuisance or worse behaviors in their communities. The experience that I bring to bear is with respect to dealing with the New Life Evangelistic Center, which I viewed as a reckless operator with no respect for its neighborhood, and concomitantly, it didn't help the homeless people it served. I think more focus should be directed toward regulating homeless shelters in terms of ensuring that they are actually providing services to the chronically homeless that is going to enable that unfortunate population to transition from a homeless state to a housed state. And that's where the focus should lie. Weakening the plat and petition requirement is going to basically deprive the neighborhoods of having a voice as to whether these types of facilities where chronically homeless are going to be housed are going to create problems in their neighborhood that they view to be intolerable. Coincidentally, the Riverbound Neighborhood Association just sent a letter to its alderman, I believe yesterday, indicating that we would welcome the opportunity to consider having a homeless facility located in our neighborhood. Unfortunately, we've had major fires, demolition by arson type situations, and some of the proposed structures for such facility have been destroyed in the last couple of years. But we would like to have that conversation with the city of St. Louis as to whether the city of St. Louis could actually ensure that a homeless shelter would open up there for the chronically homeless, make sure that it actually provides the services that
Mr. Kistner, that's your time.
Please finish that thought, though.
What do you want?
Please finish that thought that you had.
You want me to finish?
That thought that you had, yes, please. And the ask that you had. To work with the city, you were speaking about your...
The second thing is liquor license, they should be difficult to get. I don't think, maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah, no,
Give me specific direction.
I was saying, can you finish the thought that you were speaking on when I was asking that you finish that thought, because absolutely it's a great one, and we make sure that we're sharing. I'm sure the administration is watching as well.
Thank you.
So can you?
May I think I know what his question is. You were saying that your neighborhood that you're in part of would be interested in potentially having a building used for this purpose. And I think what Alderwoman Clark Hubbard and I are wondering is which one? What's the address? Have you talked to the city?
Well, yeah, if that's a serious question, I'll try to answer it now. But there are several buildings. The one that, the building that just was the major, do you want me to finish or do you want me to do an email? The major fire on the near north riverfront on a Saturday, I think it was maybe 3 Saturdays ago. Did everybody read about it? I mean, it was a disaster. That was one that we were looking at. There are others that I can't identify now. I will talk to the people the members of the neighborhood association who have particular properties in mind. But yeah, we really want, the idea is this, try to be as brief as possible. The city helps to ensure that the facility that opens actually delivers the critical services. As a quid pro quo for the neighborhood saying, bring it on, which I think is slightly unusual, the city would also try to ensure that to the extent that there is a increased need to be attentive to whether this population is causing problems in the neighborhood, maybe some enhanced ability to get some security and monitoring of what's actually going on to make sure that those of us who are actually contributing to a solution do not end up becoming somewhat victims of our own, grace. But I'll send you emails about this.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that. That was refreshing. All right, next.
James Page. And we have one speaker on Zoom. We have to both swear in at the same time. Mr. Page, do you affirm the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes. He's in opposition.
Honorable Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard, good to see you. And members of the Board of the HUD's Committee. I've taken a very close look at Board Bill 227, and it strikes me as an attempt to use a heavy cudgel, a hammer, an axe on the residents of the city of St. Louis. The hardworking, tax-paying citizens who voted for you to bring you into office, who rely on you, the Board of Aldermen, and this committee to represent them. I don't think Board Bill 227 does that. There are dozens of reasons why I am convinced this is the case. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to talk about two very briefly. The first is that Board Bill 227 destroys, decimates the plat and petition process, putting the decision on a new homeless shelter and other special residential uses entirely in the hands of just 25% of area residents. What happened to 51%? What happened to a majority of the residents in question? And this process provides no vote whatsoever to property owners, business owners, neighborhood associations, the police, and local aldermen, such as yourselves. The second one, Board Bill 227, places the Board of Election Commissioners in charge of verifying signatures, including those of persons who are not registered as voters, despite the fact that the Board of Election Commissioners has no experience or expertise in this area. So that's just two items. So as a proud 21.5-year resident of the downtown west community of the city of St. Louis, I ask you to reconsider Board Bill 227, hold it in committee, have some more hearings, get some more input, and let's come up with better legislation. I yield the balance of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last, our last speaker is Don Smith Popilski. I have to swear you in. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And you're in opposition, correct?
Correct.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much, and good morning, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify. My name is Dawn Smith Popelski, and fantastic job with my name, thank you. I'm a resident of the 9th Ward, and Alderman Browning is my alderman. I also wanted to thank Keith Fairchild and other people in the Alliance for helping me get more involved with this. I just have to give Keith some kudos for being very organized and making people aware of what's going on. I serve on the Westminster Tri-Block Neighborhood Association Board, and I'm also trying to help the neighborhood just north of us, which is a small section of all of Washington from Kings Highway to Taylor to Delmar. They do not currently have a neighborhood association, and I'm trying to help them form one or get more involved in the process as well. I'm specifically testifying against any sort of modification or removal of plat and petition, especially because I think that the petition process across Missouri, especially in regards to women's reproductive rights, is under fire. And I really would not want to see any further ability to voice your opinion or have that be heard reduced in any way. I had previously worked on a project in Decatur, Georgia, trying to get a neighborhood incorporated into an adjacent city, and we also had to use a similar petition process. We were ultimately not successful, but we respected what our neighborhood and our neighbors had said, that they did not find it of value. I think it was maybe 48% of us did, and 52% of us did not, but we still had to respect that outcome. Now, I think, when you select a neighborhood to move into, you're doing so on the basis of what that neighborhood character and the resources are, with a somewhat reasonable expectation that it's probably going to be relatively safe and stable. Whether it's the character of the businesses there, restaurants, maybe even bars, and what happened, or what have you. In regards to shelters, say if Doorways and Cooper House said that they wanted to add another location based on the work that they've done, I would absolutely be in support of that. But if Larry Rice and you know, New Life Evangelical Center tried to come in, I would really absolutely be against that. So I think that it's hard to say, okay, trying to remove or reduce plat and petition would make that a more difficult process to really vet out what's going to happen. But there was an incident recently very close to my house with a neighborhood church that has run a pantry for years, and it's done very well. It's helped a lot of people. However, it's become so popular.
Ms. Popilski, that's your time.
Thank you.
Did you want to finish your thought, ma'am?
I can mail it if that would be better, but it was just an issue with a food bank that's getting overrun, unfortunately, and not having a great plan in place about what happens when the resident or the people coming in have actively harassed some of the businesses and employees there that I think police had to get involved.
Thank you so much, and thank you for taking the time as well. I love that you show how we can do it hybrid, and you can come in on Zoom and give your testimony, but you also know that you can email it in. That's another way that people participate, and it's good for us, for our other colleagues too, to be able to read the comments as well. So thank you so much, and thank you for the work you're doing to build up the neighborhood organizations. Is there any other speakers?
That's the list of our speakers.
Okay. All right, we'll start, bring Vice Chair Sonnier back up, and we'll start with Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you, Alderman Sonnier, and thank you to everyone who came and spoke today. There was a lot of really good information provided, and I always appreciate hearing from our neighborhoods. So I got a lot of emails on this, and I know we talked shortly about this yesterday, and I wanted to go through some of the questions that folks have sent me, and I do appreciate you having a frequently asked questions handout and any ability to make that public. I appreciate as well. So I think the main question that folks have been having is making sure their voices will be heard in this process if there is any change, either this sort of change or any change that's sort of a non-negotiable. So can you give a little bit more of an outline of when you think that people will have the ability to raise their concerns and the way that your bill provides for that?
Thank you for the question, Alderwoman Schweitzer. I think this bill proposes several opportunities for community engagement, for voices to be heard, and I would say in some ways expands that. One of the things that frustrates, even in my community, sometimes constituents and residents, is right now you only have to put public notification up at the facility of where you want to have it, and that's not something that necessarily everyone will see. So I think the first point is we're mandating awareness. If you want to open one of these facilities, if you are successful in collecting your signatures and your signature verification, you have to send out a postcard to 100% of the folks within that radius who qualify for plat and petition. I know during some of the testimony, someone referenced changing it, but we're not changing anybody who plat and petition applies to, so it still will apply to registered voters and property owners. And then even after that, after you are made aware of the process and you get the hearing information, the intent on making the provisional license for these types of facilities is so that there are several opportunities, even once the facility is open, for the community to continue to weigh in, and so that the providers are really incentivized to do that community engagement, because you know that you have another hearing in order to continue to operate. And so I think that the 8-month kind of community checkpoint, community trial with the facility is with 3 hearings is a time period for input. I think that the awareness is a time put for input. And then we will also hopefully be able to have some data input. Once a facility is operating again, being able to pull nuisance reports, police reports, CSB reports, things that I know we all look at for our communities often, should also help with that, because we'll be able to see in regards to this address what has happened there and what have folks voiced.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the part about increasing posted signage and increasing information that goes out to people and any interaction that occurs with a potential provider and a community group and the neighborhood in general, voters, tenants, owners. Can you talk a little bit more about the 25% threshold, how you chose that number for your bill, and you talk about how this will be available to both registered voters and property owners. Did you have something in the bill about people who live in the buildings, or can you talk a little bit more about, establishing a 25% threshold? You need a very specific number of how many people that is, so you know if someone has gotten to 25%. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So the number one, the 25% threshold move, I think if you speak to a lot of folks who have to navigate this process and you look at their success rate, a lot of them say, I never even get to the point where I get to have a hearing. I never get to the point where I get to engage in real dialogue with community and those conditional use. A lot of times that's the place where us as alders and we're community members, we will tell a facility, hey, you can operate here on the terms of this, but the unhoused providers, if they can't make it to a hearing point, they don't get to have those conversations. And so I really looked at just like what are the chances of folks coming to their door. Wanted to take a look at kind of like other plat and petition processes, but St. Louis is an outlier as far as having that process. And so we went with 25% in hopes that that would be a more manageable number for folks to make contact and get their signatures. But also, again, it is also why I added the requirement for, you have to let folks know come, because the idea is to have dialogue and have conversations. Hearings are the place for that, but obviously folks can't engage if they don't know that someone's coming to their community or trying to open up a facility. So 25% was kind of chose, given that I knew I was going to add a provisional license component, given that I knew there would be 3 check-ins, and given that we want to give them a chance to get through the door and to get to a hearing, and also understanding that it is just that 25% is not giving you the green light to operate. Doesn't mean you can open your doors. It's just the threshold you need to to operate. And your second question.
More about the technicalities of, the Board of Election provides a list, and this list says there are 100 people who fit property owner or registered voter. This is your threshold. You need 26% or 25%, I guess, for 100 people.
Yes. So the Board of Elections, their role in the process is really important because we want to make sure that the providers have up-to-date accurate lists, and they have the most up-to-date accurate list. And obviously, if we're going to mandate that they do outreach, we need to make it easier for them to have a list. And so the Board of Elections, we had conversations. They said, we have the ability to access the Recorder of Deeds database and see who's property owners. We already have the registered database, and folks could come to us to pull their list to know where they need to go knock, and they could also come to us for the verification process. We don't manually call each person, and we already have a process in place. And they also indicated the benefit to us as a city getting to a point where we have one entity that does this rather than several different departments doing signature verification and using several different methods of verification.
Right, so that does speak to then the building division doing this collection of signatures and being the repository for it.
Yes, and what's interesting is the building commission, because all of our zoning, when you apply, you get denied, your things actually end up going to the Board of Adjustment. So the building commissioner's role kind of does exist on paper, because not a single of our zoning areas allows for shelters. The moment that you would apply, you would get denied, and you would end up going to the Board of Adjustment. So they were kind of involved in the conversation, but they also just kind of, as the process is, because of zoning, it ends up going to the Board of Adjustment.
So I'm sorry, you're envisioning that this is going to the Board of Adjustment? Is that the board you're envisioning?
In a bill, we intentionally don't say it
Right.
because technically it should be the building commission, but until we figure out our zoning bill allow for shelters to operate in one, it ends up going to the Board of Adjustment.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, and that kind of comes up later in my questions, but to that point, it does kind of add a layer of confusion if it's like, what does a hearing look like? Is it the building commissioner sitting there kind of running a meeting? It's kind of, because it's left vague in the bill, it doesn't explain how that hearing will take place necessarily.
It'll take place just like it takes place now. Nothing will change. Right now, it's not necessarily the building commissioner who operates those meetings. So we're not changing. However it operates now is how it will operate moving forward. We're not changing that.
Okay. So continuing on with some of these questions, kind of on the other end of the petition standards that take place, if you have to have a petition to open, is it true that, does it follow then the same way that there's any ability for residents 25% or more to get a hearing to close it?
So this bill, it doesn't address the protest process, the protest process. So technically, that standard would be the same since this bill is just a reform plat and petition bill, but it doesn't address the protest process. I do think kind of the intention of the bill, though, is to make sure that people have several opportunities to come in and protest, and that it's not just the revocation process or the protest process, because that's kind of what a lot of folks said, didn't work for them. So the reason we're creating the provisional license process is we kind of built in a process where if it doesn't work, if folks don't like it, they have several opportunities before the place can operate permanently to come and share those sentiments. So the official protest process is not in this bill, but there are some things baked in so that community can continue to put their voice in and let us know how is it impacting you as they operate.
And I think that is part of the concerns that I've heard brought up, and I agree with, is that, if you have this 120 days for the temporary permit to be granted, and they don't start operating, to the point of some of the speakers, within like day one, you're not going to have actually 120 days of operation to really know if it's a good actor if they have their permit and then don't open for 150 days. They might not show that, what, if any, thought have you given to that concern of residents?
I mean, I think that process is kind of in our process now when we have use hearings. When that process takes place, when you open up, the business owner says, here's our hours of operation, here's the date that we plan on opening our doors, and then you talk about those specific terms and conditions. I think that's kind of already in the process as it exists. As far as when a facility will open up their doors, again, this is similar to, if we're talking about restaurants, when they open up their doors, those specifics, one, hopefully that will be in the operational plan that they have to submit. That is data that's requested. We want to know what's your plans. But then also when they get to the point of having these hearings, they should be a lot clearer in what can happen and be able to share that information at that time and have that information written into the conditions of use.
Right. I think that folks would be a lot more comfortable if they're actually giving feedback on whether or not someone gets a permanent permit after they're already, if they were to have started already operating, not just have it in plan and not just have it in writing, but sort of the actual performance of this shelter in their neighborhoods and in their community. Because if they're just giving input without that, I guess I don't see why they would give up anything, in terms of control of the process, if it's able to open without, and open and have a permanent permit without already being operational in their neighborhood.
But they have to operate for temporarily before they can get a permanent license. So the first hearing, they haven't opened yet. The second hearing, they should have been operating for 4 months. And at the third hearing, they should have been operating for an additional 4 months. So by the time they get to a permanent conversation, they should be able to point to 8 months of operation. And if they can't, that can be a reason for denial.
Okay. Yeah. I just mean when someone a permit is issued, doesn't necessarily mean now that is an operational, it is at full capacity. They are operating as if they would be operating, the amount of time it will take to get up and running. I think I don't know any organizations that can do it within 8 months. Where are they at the process where they get that permit? Are they ready for move-in? And if they put in the money to be ready for move-in and they're denied, what happens to that building? So it kind of adds some kind of ambiguity to what constitutes, I guess, what constitutes operational. If you're talking about some of the buildings that they're looking at, by the time they're looking to get permitting and do a lot of the work that they need to do to even consider the building, they're not going to be just able to walk in and have it. You know, this is potentially years of effort on the shelter's part. So I think that part needs some work in terms of what we're talking about when we talk about operational. To that point, there's been some concern that I've heard expressed from folks who've reached out to me about the ambiguity of the definition of special residential uses. Can you explain a little bit more of the definition you chose in that section, section 902.1, and why you chose to define it that way, please?
Let me just pull that up.
Thank you.
Okay, so the special residential units, special residential use definition, we had a working group where we kind of looked at all of those uses that fall under that and kind of looked around at other places where definitions exist and pulled it from there. And even though the term special residential use, you know, it is going to be vague because it just categorizes so many different uses. It's also why we came in and then gave specific definitions of each of those special residential uses. It's hard to come up with one definition that's gonna work for dormitories, work for boarding homes, work for transitional homes, work for congregate shelters. So you need a definition that can encompass all of that, which will be a bit vague. But then also you wanna come back and define specifically what each of those instances are, which is one of the things.
But what the bill doesn't do is define different processes for each of those different things.
No, because right now they all have this process. This is their, right now they all have this process. This is what they use. So in order, if I would have left anything out, then I would have had to go through and define a different process for each one. But the goal was, since all of these processes use this, let's keep it the same.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think that's interesting to kind of dive more into is what these uses are. You know, obviously, I didn't support the previous bill that you brought forward on this topic, but what I liked that bill did is break out different qualifications for the various different types of shelters that exist. You know, I think in our neighborhoods, when we talk about what fits in and what doesn't fit into the neighborhood, you know, an 100-bed shelter might not be appropriate in one location where an 8-bed shelter might be. And we have zoning and these differences in what is allowed in specific areas to help inform some of those decisions. So I would think a weakness really of this bill in our current system is that it does have one way of doing every single thing. And when we talk about this and we talk about 100-bed shelters versus an 8-bed shelter versus, you know, shelters that, you know, I've been talking to Director Pearson with the Department of Human Services about working with small landlords for, you know, that kind of permanent placement. And what does that look like? You know, there's a lot of huge differences in what we're talking about. So I guess I'd be interested in fleshing that bit out a little bit more. And I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think you and I can definitely talk about some language around, you know, something that happens all the time currently with the conditional use permit is sometimes I just have to ask a continuance on behalf of the business that's trying to open because they don't have something together. So I think for your earlier point, we could talk about some language that would make it clear on kind of when the clock starts of that operating time. I think there's some language we can add around that. And then I think with this point around kind of what kind of facilities, definitely want to have those conversations. But one of the things that the last set of bills did is address zoning, which will require us to go through the planning and commission use and kind of a separate conversation. For this, I kind of felt like having all those conversations at once was a bit much for folks. And so I wanted to pick a place to start. I wanted to start with the plat and petition process. And I wanted to do something that, you know, we weren't yet digging into the weeds on where people should go, because I think that's always going to be a charged situation. It's always going to be an intense conversation. We are more so talking about how and what that process should be, but totally open to having those conversations.
Well, I appreciate that. And I can understand from your perspective, you're seeing bill that you put forward as sort of the most difficult that it could be. Right. Okay. And so, yeah, so there's somewhere in there, you know, there could be some arguments about whether this is the most difficult that it should be, or if this is the least difficult it should be. And is this the least difficult? Then is that for the 8-bed shelters? Or, you know, I think there's room to talk about that, because we can discuss all day the differences, and, you know, you broke them out, the special residential uses. There are very different things that we're talking about here. So I appreciate that and your openness to keep working on that piece. Okay, so we talked about if this would apply to across all zoning districts, and that's something that you're interested in talking about at a later time. Good. So, you know, when we talk about property owners and voters, I missed this point earlier, we're not then talking about the businesses that are there. So say you have a business, they're not a property owner and they're not a voter. Are you saying that that person isn't signing, and are they not included in any signature gathering process now?
Yeah, as a plat and petition exists right now, if you're the property owner and you run a business, your signature counts, but if you're not, it doesn't. I do think that the plat and petition process in its totality needs to be looked at and needs to be reviewed, but for the sake of this bill and for the sake of trying to address some of the immediate needs of our community, we just kept the process as it is. And so anybody who previously counted for plat and petition will count for plat and petition under this, and I did not propose any changes to that.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 more questions here. So one is regarding restrictions relating proximity in which a shelter can be open near a school or any other thing. Can you talk a little bit more about what Board Bill 227 does there?
Yes, so there is, Board Bill 27 just would take away, there's a limit right now on 500 feet. I think it says 500 feet within a school or 500 feet within a church in order to to open up a shelter or a special residential use. We just kind of struck that line out for a couple of reasons. The first one being that in execution is not playing out, because oftentimes it's a lot of churches and those different services and industries who are operating the shelter. So that complicates it in that regard. But the other reason is that we have over 60 schools, I think 62 in our city. And so it's very difficult to find the placement to be away, when you have to be away from, you know, you can't be 500 feet within a school, can't be 500 feet with a church, but our city is full of churches and it's full of schools. So where would you go? So we kind of just struck that out, but again, with the intention that when you have these conversations, you still do have to talk to everybody within your 500-foot radius. You still do have to engage all of those stakeholders, but it's a little discriminatory, especially given just the extreme amount of churches and shelters that we have. Where would you go? Many of the shelters that we have in place in our city now, they exist within those boundaries near them, of course, after going through the process, because it's just, I mean, how would you, we are 61.2. It just, you can't, it's hard to find a place that would be able to meet that barrier.
I understand. I think that not having, you know, likely the students at the school, or if it's a school that is renting the space, for example, they wouldn't have any voice in the discussion in this board bill if it were to go forward as written, except, you know, at least to get before the hearing. You're right that they could come to the hearing and speak. I guess my last question, I have 2 more questions. One is regarding community benefit agreements. That's something that is sort of implied in the operational plan and with working with the neighborhoods to kind of reach consensus, but it's not implicitly written. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, number one, community benefits agreements have to come from the community. If we do it, they're public benefits agreements. But I think the second thing is, I do think like that has to, I hope that the community, and that's part of what I hope the hearing space provides, they need to be able to speak about what they need for shelter, to feel comfortable with shelters or facilities operating in their residence. This bill outlines kind of, it would say what the city thinks needs to be necessary and what the city thinks has to be there, and kind of mandates, kind of gives some points as far as how to do community engagement, and also talks about some of the information that I think should be available to the community where they want to go. But we didn't get too deep into the weeds with defining community benefits agreements, because that really needs to be, or we're calling it community benefits agreements. I don't really know if we would necessarily even call it that, but if there are specific things that a community wants to see that would help them feel comfortable with the shelter being there, the hearing is the place to have those conversations, and their permit with the conditions on it would be the place to put those things there. But I know every community is very different, so it's kind of weird. Even for me in just my ward, each neighborhood might want different things for a facilitator to offer. So we just kind of want to more outline, here's what's mandatory, here's the information that you have to provide, and then leave the door open for communities to have those conversations about some further specifics.
Yeah, I appreciate that having the benefits built into the permit makes sense. That adds some more of the ability for the city to do something about it if it's not followed. But yes, a lot of people did talk about the difficulty of doing something about it when you do have problem actors. We deal with it all day, every day here at the board, within our communities, for properties that have so many violations, so many calls for service, and it takes so long. It's not the city's not doing it, it's just that it takes a really long time, and sometimes it's not effective. So, you know, that's kind of brings me back to the point of, you know, how do we define operational for what's happening, and what real teeth does the city have? Because so often with private businesses or private homes that are causing issues, it's still, you know, months, years in the process of dealing with these problem actors, even with all of the conditions that you pointed out. So I just want to make sure that's said. Another question that
If there's any specifics that you know, this is just a draft. I know Alderman Brown, and I'm sure he'll get to his question. He and I talked about a component he'd like to see added to the operational plan. So happy to talk about any specifics that you think need to be added. This is not the final version. This is a version to get the conversation started. I'm sure everything is in check. So certainly if there's some information there, we can definitely do an amendment or a committee substitute to add in some of that language, because Alderman Brown had mentioned I think would be good to be a part of it, that we can kind of add in.
Thank you so much. The last question I have is considerations around requirements or standards around extreme weather shelters, as we discussed here in the room.
So this would apply to all shelters, but not those who are going through the emergency process, because as they mentioned, we have the authority as a city to kind of give the green light to some of those emergency pop-up shelters. But what I will say in regards to that is, the hopes of this bill is that we create more permanent infrastructure so that we're not as reliant on the emergency. You know, I think Department of Human Resources, Human Health Services, I would give my hats off to Dr. Pierce. Works extremely hard to coordinate that and pop that up. But we lost 150 beds because one building had a pipe leaking. You know, there was a couple instances when we were in our extreme weather where, because the process for those emergency things are so last minute, they're completely reliant upon volunteers a lot of times. It's not necessarily sustainable even for the cold weather period. So while this bill doesn't address anything specifically for cold weather, the idea is that these would be shelters that would be operating year round, regardless of whether we're in or extreme cold. It would be something that would be a resource available to folks year round, and it would have permanent infrastructure, which is why we're asking for staffing ratios, why we're asking about the services that would be offered.
Thank you, and thank you to members of the committee for allowing me so much time today. Most of these questions were pulled directly from emails and feedback that I received from folks in my community and people who'd reached out. So hopefully anyone who's watching at home feels like their voice was heard in the questions. And if you have more questions, never hesitate to send them to me. I'm always happy to ask them. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Cone. Okay. Alderman Browning.
Thank you. I want to thank the sponsor, Alderwoman Sonnier, for the conversation both yesterday and today. Really look forward to discussing this more in the future. Just a couple clarifying questions. I do appreciate Alderwoman Schweitzer's thoroughness, and also agree that there are different needs at different levels, and I'd like to see some kind of structure that addresses that in the future. I definitely understand the goal here and agree that we do need some more beds in some areas. My question is, what are we aiming? Where are we aiming to gain beds? What's our target? Are we looking to build more emergency beds, more transitional housing? What is the specific goal and in the increase of beds that we're looking to see?
I think the goal of this legislation is we know that there's a need in all of those, just to provide a navigatable pathway to all of those needs not specifying whether it is, the congregate shelter or the other forms of housing was intentional, but the goal is to provide a pathway for any of those needed resources in our communities to have something that they can navigate and get their doors open in a way that helps them to be, a part of communities and not just in.
Okay, thank you. I have no additional questions.
All right. I'm sorry, Vice Chair Sonnier, you're welcome to close.
I just want to thank you all for having this conversation, for lifting up your constituents' voices for me, for being available for phone calls. I know that this conversation is not an easy one. I know that it's a very complex and nuanced issue to address and to speak on. And so I was very intentional about choosing this as a starting place, because I think this is the easiest place for us to begin some of these conversations that we need to have. And that's not to say that the conversation is ever going to be easy, because that will never be the place. But if there was a place to build it, acknowledging a process, is difficult. And I think the thing with this process that's interesting is I would argue it is not just failing unhoused providers if it doesn't work, it's failing people in the community. Because I know that our residents and our constituents want to be in positions where they can interact with the unhoused in a place where it's not just disruptive, where it's not just a burning building or unpleasant interaction of business, or having to say you can't come in and use my bathroom. And so the goal of the legislation is just to create a reform process that we know isn't working, but reform in a way that does address things from all sides. I hope when you review the bill, you'll see like this wasn't just made thinking of one party in this process, really did think through communities, residents, unhoused providers, unhoused folks, like what is needed to get a resource that they can get. And again, I think when we have these conversations, we lean more towards permanent affordable housing, which is certainly needed, and I'll never combat that. But also there are folks who do have a need for shelter. I know there's some conversations around kind of larger responsibility that I'm also a huge advocate and supporter of. But in the meantime, this bill is trying to say, we need to put something into place for the folks that are here. And again, something that doesn't cost us any money, something that doesn't get into some of the weeds. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't get into the weeds, we should, but I think these conversations, just like when you start with the book, you start at chapter 1, we're just starting at the beginning. And so just want to thank you all for your conversation. We're going to go on spring break, so please, happy to meet, happy to talk, happy to work on language changes to amendments that will make this better. I don't think that this is a perfect draft. I don't think that it encapsulates everything, because I don't think that perfect legislation exists before you have conversations with community and hear some of the opposition. And also I want to thank everyone who came today to testify. I'm a big proponent of, whether we agree or disagree, the fact that we can sit down at the table, especially in our city that specializes in silos, is often a gift and a sign of progress itself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Sonnier, not just for, look, your level of commitment and passion to these causes is clear. And we just thank you for all that you're doing here. And I agree, I thank everyone for coming to committee. This is where it happens. This is where it happens. So I think to Mr. Fairchild's point, we should, as a committee, explore possibly having, my phone's been blowing up during this meeting about this issue from my constituents, and emails as well. So maybe again to Mr. Fairchild's comments, we can, as a committee, commit to having a Zoom hearing in the evening to be able to allow opportunity for some other constituents to participate one way or the other out of the various ways. And again, continue this very much needed, but definitely also we need to get as much in the weeds as we can because of our constituents, the commitment we have to our constituents on not just this, but everything that we do down here at the Board of Aldermen. So with that, I'll see if any of my other comments have any closing comments about this before we move on the agenda. Okay. Any written testimony?
We have 14.
Do they note if they're in opposition or?
They are in opposition.
Okay. And any announcements? Okay, we're all present. Yay, Alderman Cone made it. So we're all present. No need for excuse members. I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Previous roll. Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed day.